A new day means a new story. Here at Spread Channel. Hello everyone and welcome back. This is today's story, so make sure you are comfortable enough. You will enjoy this one. While Mary was cleaning up around her husband's grave one day, she happened to uncover something highly disturbing. There, on the floor, right by his grave, was a strange-looking hole. After pondering for quite some time what it might be, she decided to do something crazy. What happened next startled her completely. It wasn't unusual for Mary to go almost a month without visiting her husband's grave. They had never been very rich people, so work was a priority. He had requested that he get buried upstate with his family at an old cemetery, so it made it quite difficult to visit him too. But she made an effort regardless. After all, she had loved him very much. Thankfully, she got Mondays off from work at the diner, so she would often seize the opportunity to go. Then one particular Monday, she traveled upstate to visit Henry's grave. It was cold and dreary as fall was rolling in. When she saw his heads down, she immediately felt ashamed. The grass had overgrown terribly, along with some horrible-looking weeds. Next to all the other headstones, Henry's looked to be in a state of shambles. Along with the grass were tons of leaves from the overhanging tree above. It was going to take some work getting the area cleaned up, that was for sure. But Mary didn't mind. She knew the bus timetable by heart. She would just catch the last bus that afternoon when she was done. So she sat down her bag, took out her gardening tools, and went to work cleaning up the area she first started by clearing away the leaves. While she was collecting the bunch by his headstone, she noticed a peculiar-looking hole. She went to take a closer look and found that it was quite deep. In fact, she was sure that it was probably as deep as the grave itself. It wasn't small either. The entrance to the hall was quite wide. The curiosity of what the hole might be quickly turned into a sense of dread. The hall was a bit too close to the headstone for her liking. In fact, she was worried that it might be going down a bit too near his coffin. She went to find the cemetery custodian and showed him what she was concerned about. He looked briefly and then brushed her off, saying it was probably nothing. He assured her that he took the best care of the graves and nothing could disturb the beloved people who had been buried. Mary was hardly convinced by the mere state of the cemetery itself. She struggled to believe that this man was taking the greatest care of everything. In addition to this, she simply couldn't shrug off the God feeling she had. There was something about the whole situation that made her uncomfortable. So she decided to call her son and see what he thought straight off the bat. Her son seemed to think she was crazy. He told her to stop faffing around the headstone to do what she came for, and then leave. He even went as so far to say that his father would not have liked her to worry like she was about something as stupid as a hole in the ground. Insulted and quite hurt, Mary sat for a while, staring at the hole. She knew her son was probably right about what her husband would think. But if he were in her shoes, she knew her husband would have checked to see what was going on. So she got up and decided to act on her gut. Feeling, she went to the custodian's tools. She sneakily took a spade from the bag. He was nowhere to be seen, not that it surprised her much. She then went quickly back to the grave and began to dig where the hole was. Being a small, frail woman, this was not an easy feat for her at all. She struggled to get the hard ground loose enough to pull it all up, so she started picking out the hole with the corner of the big spade, trying to get some kind of movement to the ground. It was at this moment that she was confronted by an elderly man behind her. He shouted at her, asking what on earth she was doing. Feeling a bit embarrassed and slightly scared about what the man might think, she took her time answering. She tried to explain as sweetly as possible that she was investigating where the hole went. What happened next surprised her in a good way. Once the man heard what she was trying to do, He perked up and offered to help her. He jokingly shared that he had initially thought that she was up to something criminal, but investigating a suspicious seemed like a good idea. In hindsight, his late wife was buried there, so he didn't want anything to happen to her. He was much stronger and more nimble than Mary, so opening up the hole in the ground proved to be much easier. He threw the spade into the ground over and over, pulling up the earth as he went. Mary stood behind them, anxiously to see what lay beneath. At first, it was quite hard to see for sure what was going on with all the moving ground, but then the spade had something hard, and with a big knock, Mary could feel her stomach rise up in her throat. That didn't sound good at all. Did he just hit her husband's coffin? Obviously, the man was thinking the same thing because he suddenly recoiled from digging. He stood back, trying to see if he could see what he just hit. Sure enough, peeping out a lot more shallowly than it should have been, was a coffin. The hall had led straight to Henry's coffin, which seemed to have a hole gaping in the wooden side. Mary's mind went to the worst-case scenario. She was convinced that this was just like a story she had recently read about grave robbers who desecrated the dead for some wooden nonsense. The black market was rife with interactions like these. Frightened of what she might see, she told the man to stop. She then called the police, quickly explaining what they had stumbled on. They arrived promptly and began investigating. They had to call in a bulldozer to bring the coffin up. Naturally, Mary was feeling quite overwhelmed when she put her husband on the ground. She didn't expect to bring him up again. Definitely not a year later, when they brought the coffin up. The hole in the side of the coffin was easily noticeable, but there was something peculiar about the shape of it. When the police took a closer look at the edging, something startling became clear. Without saying much to Mary, they called in a specialist to be sure. Once he got there, he was able to confirm the theory right away. Turns out to be that some sort of pesky rodent had been burrowing around Henry's grave and had actually gnawed his way through the coffin. This happened because of two things. One, the family buried Henry in a very simple pine coffin because of a lack of funds. The second was more sinister than that. The specialists deemed that the cemetery had been cutting corners and procedures with regard to how they buried the casket. The depth of the grave was meant to be much deeper, with a better seal to help prevent this sort of desecration. When they broke the news of what had happened to Henry's coffin and her husband's body to Mary, she found herself at a complete loss for words. She knew something wasn't right, so she immediately broke down, unable to move. Her poor body had been subjected to such horror, all because of the negligent staff at the cemetery. Luckily, the man who had assisted her accompanied her down to the police station, where she laid claims against the abhorrent treatment her husband's remains had received through his burial. She felt grateful that she had been able to go through his grave when she did to put a stop to this, but she was horrified that it even happened in the first place. Once the investigation was over, she vowed to use the money gained from her lawsuit to give Henry a proper second burial. She needed to know that he was sent off the right way, and this time she would bury him closer to home so that she could visit him more often. It just goes to show that it pays in the end to do things with the right establishment and to trust one's guts. Can you imagine how terrible Mary must have felt? What would you have done if you saw the hole? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Until next time.